Good day, everyone. Of course, I am John Orstein, the Director Emeritus of the USS Monitor Center here at the Mariners Museum and Park. And I have quite a tale to tell you today, because this is all about the first successful amphibious operation of the War of the Rebellion. This is really the first victory in the East for the Union, and it also proved to show a shadow across the problems that the Confederacy had defending this important area of the coast, the Outer Banks and Sounds of North Carolina. It was a really critical stuff. This is the first combined operation of the Civil War. The inlet was used by the Confederates in a great fashion because they developed privateers, and North Carolina Squadron, the Mosquito Fleet, had gunboats that would, you have the Hatteras Lighthouse, and the Hatteras Lighthouse could see far and wide, and so they were able to let people know that, or the commerce raiders, that, oh my gosh, here comes a merchant ship. You can go get it because there are no blockaders in sight, or don't come out now because they're waiting for you. So it was very important for the Confederacy. The commerce raider was so successful for the Confederacy, lucrative and destructive on Union commerce, that the Northern losses became so significant right off of this inlet that the underwriters of New York, insurance brokers, petitioned the government to put an end to this terrible circumstance that's happening here right off of Hatteras Inlet. Just remember, Hatteras Inlet is a new inlet. There was one there before, but got closed in the 1767. This one got opened in, I think it's 1847, just by hurricanes. So the Outer Banks of North Carolina, of course, stretch from Cape Lookout, North Carolina, all the way up to the Virginia border. And there were 4 major inlets to get into the North Carolina Sounds. One of them is, of course, Hatteras. Another is Oregon, also recently formed. Another old one is Ocracoke, and also Beaufort, or Old Inlet, that got you into the town of Beaufort. So you have to realize these 4 exits and entrances are perfect for the Confederacy, and as a result of that, they become very successful. As governor, John Ellis wrote 2 weeks before he died, suddenly, wrote to Jefferson Davis, "The enemy's commerce could be cut off by privateers on the coast of North Carolina." Very, very true. Now, when North Carolina left the Union, they had an immediate need. Now, I just want to tell you that Hatteras, right, Cape Hatteras, is the eastern border, or the Outer Banks of North Carolina, plus it's the most eastern point in the Confederacy. It juts out into the Atlantic Ocean. It actually, you can see the Gulf Stream moving. And of course, all these Union ships, all merchantmen trading with the Caribbean or South America, would really want to use the Gulf Stream to speed their passage back to New York or whatever major port they're dealing with. Now, this is very, very important for the Confederacy, and all of a sudden they realize we have no defenses. And in fact, one of the sad things for North Carolina is at the very beginning of the Civil War, they mustered 22 regiments, and all but 6 have left to go to Virginia, all with the best arms, the best equipment. So what was left in North Carolina was very few soldiers. In fact, the entire Outer Banks was defended by 1,000 Confederate soldiers. One of the major units we'll learn about is the 7th North Carolina Volunteers, which soon will be changed to the 17th North Carolina Volunteer Infantry Regiment. Now, when they now you have to realize, I don't know how many of you all been to Beaufort, North Carolina, but there is a brick coastal fort there, Fort Macon. So the Beaufort Inlet into Bogue Sound is actually well defended according to concepts at the beginning of the Civil War. However, you go right up the coast, there are no forts. And so it just so happens that a brilliant guy named Brigadier General Walter Gwynn was assigned to develop fortifications for these various inlets. Gwynn, who was an 1822 graduate of West Point, was commander of the Northern Coastal Defenses of North Carolina. I have to tell you, he actually started in Norfolk, where he built or designed what is called Sewell's Point batteries, enhanced Craney Island batteries, Tanner Creek batteries. So he developed a way to defend the Elizabeth River. Brilliant guy. Why was he so brilliant? Because he's considered the father of the Southern Railway Network. And he actually was an engineer at first on the B&O Railway, and then went everywhere in the South developing railroads. Now, big trouble is we can build sand fortifications, but just got to remember, on the Hatteras Inlet, the sands are shifting all the time. And what materials do you have at hand to build these forts? You got sand. So basically, the first fort built is going to be called Fort Hatteras, and it was located 1/8 of a mile from the inlet itself, and 3/4 a mile away from its companion fort, which would be Fort Clark, named for the governor that replaces John Ellis. So it gets complex, I guess, around here. And so Governor Henry Toole Clark. So what's going to happen is that they build it out of sand, then they put wooden planking around the exterior of the fort, wooden planking to support their bomb proofs and magazines. And then they went and cut up marsh sod and put it on the outside of the fort to hold that sand together. Now, I have to tell you that the forts, I have to tell you, this is 250 yards wide, the entrance to Hatteras Inlet. And so basically, they need to arm them. Now, all these cannon that are going to arm these forts have to come from Norfolk, Virginia. At first, they can use the canals. They can also use railroads that take you down to Raleigh, that then take you to Goldsboro, that then takes you to New Bern. You still had to transport, these guns, these heavy guns, out to Hatteras. Now, the trouble is, the fort was not well armed. They had 12 32-pounders, model 1833, which did not have great distance. So 32-pounders. They also have 4 other 32-pounders that they never get a chance to mount. And believe it or not, from Norfolk comes this great 10-inch rifle gun. The trouble is, when they sent it down with its carriage, they forgot to send down the ammunition. So that's a big problem if you're going to try and defend Hatteras Inlet. So, in essence, there's going to be troops from about 400 troops at Hatteras under the command of William Martin, and they actually were part of the 7th North Carolina Volunteers that had been mustered in June of 1861 at Plymouth, North Carolina. And so basically they get assigned. Now, the Confederates have about 1,000 soldiers to defend the entire Outer Banks, so they have huge problems. Now, I have to tell you, the Commerce Raiders are going to be very nasty. This gives you even better view. So basically, the Commerce Raiders, you can see where the Hatteras Lightout is, how easy it is to get out. The Commerce Raiders are going to prey upon these ships. Basically, several North Carolina squadron, so-called Mosquito Fleet, gunboats like the CSS Warren Winslow, sometimes it's just called Winslow, preyed on Union merchant shipping. The Winslow had operated as the Coffee in Norfolk region as a ferry working the Albemarle Chesapeake Canal. Now, I got to tell you that the Winslow was a sidewheeler built in 1846 by B.C. Terry of Keyport, New Jersey, and it was fast. And it was commanded by Lieutenant Commander Thomas M. Crossan, and right away, they're able to capture numerous vessels. In fact, the Winslow itself captured 9 northern merchant ships, including loads like Cuban molasses, Cuban sugar, coal, and other things desperately needed in the Confederacy. There are other boats that also operated. The richest prize, I'll just tell you, of the Winslow is the Lydia Francis. And it had a load of sugar, it had molasses, it had fruit. Oh my gosh, it had everything the Confederates wanted. So several privateers recognized this easy pickings. And so actually York, a pilot boat from Norfolk, came down, it's not a steamer, and it will capture 3 merchantmen until it was forced to run aground and abandon. Another ship comes up from Charleston, known as the Gordon, and it will actually have a very successful career and takes 4 prizes. This, when you start to add up all there are other smaller privateers that capture 1 or 2, but these are the main ones. So just adding up what they have done, they have captured 16 major Union merchant ships. Now, if you think about some of the Commerce Raiders serving the Confederacy, some only captured 5. So, it is a huge impact on Northern shipping. And of course, the Navy Department was immediately bombarded about the situation along the North Carolina coast by Northern businessmen, ship owners, custom house officials, insurance brokers. Now, they actually will harangue Gideon Wells, Secretary of the Navy for the Union, and actually he writes Silas Stringham, the commander of the Atlantic blockading squadron, that, oh my gosh, you got to do something about it, because the accounts we get of intercourse at different ports and inlets on the coast alarm our commercial community, cause embarrassment and distrust to the department. Actually, Lieutenant Thomas O. Selfridge Jr., who's aboard the sloop of war Cumberland, will write, quote, it seems that the coast of North Carolina is infested with the nest of privateers that have thus far escaped capture, and in the ingenious method of their cruising, are probably likely to avoid the clutches of our cruisers. And Hatteras Inlet, a little south of Cape Hatteras Light, seems to be their principal rendezvous. Here they have fortifications that protect them from assault, a lookout on the lighthouse proclaims the coast is clear, and out they go and get another ship. So now we have what is known as the Blockade Squad, Blockade Strategy Board in Washington, headed by Captain Samuel Francis DuPont. And so they are charged with how to stop Confederate commerce, as well as this type of commerce raiding. So the board recommended, they wrote 7 different reports, and their first report said, we need to capture Ferdinand, Florida first. That's the place we need to go. So what's going to happen is that all these complaints that were happening, they decide to make a move against Hatteras. And their plan was to sink old wooden ships laden with ballast there at the entrance, which would block it for commerce. However, I have to tell you, Flag Officer Silas Horton Stringham will immediately say, speak of the inlet at Hatteras as decidedly the worst place on the coast. I much regret I have not 2 vessels to place and keep there. I have also conversed with these men as to the advantage of sinking vessels in the inlet. They all pronounce this to be of little use because the light and shifting nature of the sand, a new inlet would soon open. Accordingly, Hatteras Inlet became the first target for the Atlantic blockading squadron. Now, so Gideon Welles knows he can't have a successful operation unless he brings in the army. And so he sends a message to General Wool, can I get some troops? Wool says yes, but his orders, Wool's orders, which Stringham hears about, was told it originated in the Navy Department and is under its control. And so Stringham knew he had to do something. So Will, basically, Ben Butler will be assigned to recruit soldiers to form this coastal division. Basically, he goes to, now, Butler, he's a hero for the Contraband War decision. He is also a pariah for his defeat at Big Bethel. But because of his political strength, he gets to stay as a brigadier general in the army. Now, so he goes to Camp Butler on Newport News Point and Camp Hamilton, which is where Phoebus is located today, right outside of Fort Monroe, and recruits the following individuals. 22 men from the 9th New York Infantry Regiment, Hawkins Zouaves, 500 men from the 20th New York Infantry Regiment, all German recruits or immigrants, and commanded by Colonel Max Weber, 100 men from the 99th New York Volunteer Infantry, the Union Coast Guard, 60 men from the U.S. Artillery Regiment. Total of 880 men were available for landing on the beach north of Fort Clark. Now, they are going to be transported to Hatteras Inlet by 2 of the hulks that were acquired by Commander Henry S. Stellwagen. And these are older steamers, the Adelaide and the George Peabody. Formerly, these ships were bought from the old Bay Line. And so basically, instead of using them as hulks, let's use them as transports. These ships are not designed to operate in the ocean, so the expedition is going to only be able to be launched when the weather is clear. Now, Silas Stringham, let me tell you, he was born in New York. He was determined to make this operation a success. He had spent his entire 51-year career in preparation for this very event. He had been on the USF president during the Little Belt Affair in May of 1811, precursor to the War of 1812. He'd been involved with the 23 June 1812 battle between the USF president and the Belvedere, HMS Belvedere. Now, that's before the war was declared, by the way. So, in essence, he had also fought under Stephen Decatur, Second Barbary Coast War. He had been a heroic in saving drowning French seamen out of Gibraltar. I have to tell you, he actually is assigned to several Navy yards, including Charleston Navy Yard outside of Boston and the Brooklyn Navy Yard in New York. So by 1841, he is promoted to captain. He is involved with the first ever major amphibious operation completed by the Army and Navy, and that is the capture of Veracruz. He is captain of the ship of the line, the USS Ohio. That's a 72 rated ship of the line. Wow. So then after that war, what is he going to do? Well, he becomes the commandant of Gosport Navy Yard until 1851. He then becomes commander of the Mediterranean Squadron. He then, between 1855 and 1859, is once again commandant of the Gosport Navy Yard. And in fact, under his command, the Navy Yard expands in a massive way. They build 2 steam screw frigates. It's an amazing workplace, the largest Navy Yard in the United States. So when the war breaks out, Stringham will be on May 1st, 1861, named as commander of the Atlantic Blockading Squadron. Wait, I all know that you are going to say, well, I thought there was a North Atlantic and South Atlantic Blockading Squadron. That only comes to effect after the Blockade Strategy Board decides the coast is too long for one squadron to control. And so they divide the ships or the squadrons in 2. Stringham, however, is in command of the squadron. He puts together a nice task force that includes the USS Minnesota, 47 guns. It also has the USS Wabash, that is 52 guns, including 2 10-inch shell guns in pivot, 28 9-inch shell guns, 14 8-inch shell guns, and 2 12-pounder smoothbores. This is a powerful platform. I have to tell you that he also has with him the USS Monticello, a steam screw gunboat that only had 1 10-inch shell gun and 2 32-pounders. There was also the Harriet Lane, the USS Monticello, USS Pawnee, and the USRCS, United States Revenue Cutters Service, Harriet Lane. Now that actually was fairly well armed with 4-inch rifled guns, and so it's pretty powerful. And then the old relic, the one we're looking at right now, the Susquehanna, is going to be part of the squadron. Now, Stringham's plan is, I don't know why my slides are not advancing. There we go. So here are the forts that are being built by the Confederates. Fort Hatteras, you can see this is after the Union occupation. These are only sketches we have of it. This is Fort Clark, a much smaller work. And here's Ben Butler, who's going to be in command of the troops that are going south. Here is quite a dandy, Colonel Rush Hawkins. who marries into the Brown family fortune, the founders of Brown University. He creates a Zouave unit known as the 9th New York, or, of course, the Hawkins Zouaves. Now, basically, this is Max Weber, who's commanding the German regiment that came from Newport News Point. Now, I have to tell you, Stringham's plan was to, this is the Pawnee, a very famous ship, was to bring his heavier ships to bombard the Confederate forts and to use his gunboats, like the Pawnee, to cover the landing. The chartered steamers, remember the ones that were going to be sunk at Hatteras Inlet that are not very seaworthy, the Adelaide and the George Peabody would come with this fleet. They towed 2 schooners that are filled with surf boats, fishing boats to land the troops. Now, also coming along with this expedition is the USS Fanny, which was there to tow the surfboards into shore. And one ship that I forgot, which I should never do, is the USS Cumberland. And the Cumberland, of course, is a sailing sloop of war that had 22 9-inch shell guns, 1 10-inch shell gun pivot, and 1 64 or 60-pounder rifle. Now, some people call it a 70-pounder rifle, but there is no such thing. So I really believe it's a 60-pounder, and the sloop was commanded by Captain John Marsden. Stringham delayed leaving Hampton Roads until August 26th because of the weather. Actually, the squadron sighted on the morning of the 27th of August, Cape Hatteras Light, and they moved into position across the bar, and that's the outer bar, from Hatteras Inlet. And Colonel Martin was shocked to see all these masts show up, and he knows he's in trouble. So he sends a message. There's no telegraph, so he has to send it by boat down to Portsmouth Island, where there is a barrack for the Confederacy. Also, it's right next to Fort Ocracoke. So they decide that these reinforcements are going to be sent up there via the CSS Warren Winslow, with a new commander of the entire operation, Flag Officer Samuel Barron. I got to tell you, Samuel Barron from Hampton, Virginia, from a very distinguished naval family, serving the nation since the Revolutionary War. He actually joined the Navy at age 2. He's the youngest midshipman on record. The only person that had a longer career in the Navy than he would have been Stringham and Hiram Paulding. So, you have to realize that Samuel Barron, outstanding officer. He will fight during the Mexican War. He will actually be chief of the Office of Orders and Details at the outbreak of the Civil War. However, when Virginia leaves the Union, he decides to go ahead and join his native state. Now, so here we are. You can see in the background the Union ships. Now, these ships are going, Susquehanna is first, then that's the Wabash. At the end is the flagship, Minnesota. They actually, Stringham will develop a really good concept. And he actually takes it from what is known as the French and British fleet action during the siege of Sebastopol, so that they try to counter against fixed fortifications with shell guns by keeping their ships in an elliptical turn, so that they were harder, they're not a fixed site, like how you used to fight with wooden warships against brick and stone forts and making the stone forts stronger. But now they're moving, the ships are a moving target, the forts are not, the ordnance has changed. And so Silas Stringham paid attention to that. So basically, he signals that the troops are to disembark at 6:45 a.m. The flag officer was sent the Harriet Lane, which you see right there, the Monticello, and the Pawnee to move in close to shore to support the landings. There's Fort Clark, you see off to the right, and here they're landing. Now, Stringham probably should have waited because there was a strong breeze coming from the southerly direction, a very stormy and strong southerly breeze, and which caused heavy surf. You can't tell the heavy surf here, but I have to tell you, the heavy surf is really so strong that they can only land 320 troops at the beach below Fort Clark. Now, Max Weber arrives. Butler stops the landings because of the heavy seas. He also recognizes that many of the fishing boats are going to be broken up in the surf, and the iron surf boats are going to sink in the surf. So these troops under the command of Max Weber, I got to tell you, they're cold, they don't have any food, they're isolated because Butler stops to reinforce them. They only have the water in their canteen. They are actually demoralized, and they did manage to pull 2 cannon ashore. So these guys were actually isolated with bad morale, and it is lucky that none of them drowned actually during this landing. Now, the heavy ships, as I told you, get into this circulus move, and this is the first time this technique is going to be used on the North American by the U.S. Navy, and the circle made them non-fixed targets, as we already talked about. DuPont's going to use this strategy at the capture of Port Royal Sound, and so this is a classic way. See, this is the beginning of the end of coastal defense fixed fortifications. It's one thing for them to be made of sand. It's a totally another thing for them to be made of brick. Because if you notice all the guns I've mentioned on board these 4 larger ships, guess what? They have rifle guns. They have heavy shell guns, which are ever so destructive. And the forts, Fort Clark does not have, they have 4 32-pounders. And let me just tell you, those 32-pounders, model 1833, do not have a great range. And so all Stringham has to do is do his loop outside the range of the Confederate forts. Now, I have to tell you that the Confederates are bombarded, so their guns are inaccurate. Their guns, they actually run out of ammunition. That's how badly the Confederacy had supported this region. So at 12:25 on the afternoon of August 28th, they will abandon Fort Clark. The heavy ships keep firing. They could watch, the flag is lowered, nothing went up in the staff, and they actually, the survivors, they abandoned the fort and made their way back to Fort Hatteras. Now, I have to tell you that the Union ships keep firing, even though Max Weber, seeing the fort abandoned, is going to move his troops into it. Actually, one of the wounded soldiers, Union soldiers, is going to come from, guess what? The Union gunfire. So there is no flag flying over Fort Hatteras. In fact, they said that it was so torn by the heavy winds that they didn't have time to replace it. So Stringham then believed that both forts are going to be, you actually can see this circulus movement happening right here in this very wonderful image from the Battles and Leaders. I think is made by J.O. Davison. In fact, I'm positive that, oh my gosh, there's no flag over Fort Hatteras. They must have surrendered as well as the other one. And so what they do is Stringham sends two of the lighter draft gunboats, the Harriet Lane and the Monticello, to get into the inlet and capture the fort. Well, I got to tell you, that's not going to happen because number one, the Harriet Lane, they don't have good charts for this inlet. Harriet Lane runs aground twice. The Monticello is able to come into the inlet, but however, as soon as they come parallel to Fort Hatteras, now those guns can hit somebody, reach out and touch somebody. And so basically the Monticello will be hit by several shells. And in essence, one shell blows off the Fort davits, another one goes through, knocks off the topsail. They riddle, one shell explodes, riddling the galley, pantry, and armory with shell fragments. And despite a big gash from a solid shot across the forward deck of the Monticello, they will have no real damage. However, they have to, because it's too narrow for them to turn around, they have to back out of the inlet and under fairly heavy fire. Wow, the Confederates are kind of happy at this moment. They've repelled the Federals and are awaiting reinforcements, which are going to come on the evening of the 28th of August in the guise of Flag Officer Barron, and he's going to bring with him over almost 400 men, including elements of the 17th North Carolina, including many of the sailors on board the Winslow, notice to their best extent, to man those guns to keep up a very heavy fire. Now, I tell you, Colonel Martin says, God, I'm glad to see you. I'm so exhausted. You need to take over command. So what happens is that Barron assumes command and he plans at night to see they're expecting more reinforcements from New Bern to arrive at any moment. So what's going to happen is Barron says, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to cross over to Fort Hatteras and capture it. But when those reinforcements do not arrive, they figure they can't do that. And had Barron known, right? In fact, his orders were to take Fort Clark by the bayonet, right? And so there are Colonel Weber's men demoralized, isolated in the fort. Almost anything could have recaptured that fort that night. But Barron instead, without reinforcements, decides to he decides to just try to fix up the fort in a better way. So I have to tell you, at 5:30 a.m., Stringham sets out the General Stringham. This is on the morning of the 29th of August. That says, prepare to engage batteries and follow my motions. Stringham had ordered the Monticello and Pawnee to attend to the troops ashore, actually giving those troops the opportunity. We'll re-embark you, or we'll give you some food. Well, Max Weber takes the food. And then at 7:30, he issues another order saying, attack batteries, but be careful not to fire near the battery in our possession. Okay, so basically, after one circuit, Stringham realizes They outrange the Confederate fort, so they all anchor. And as a result of that, they will begin pounding the fort. Actually, the fire is so heavy that by 11:10, when one shot goes down the ventilator of the battery, the magazine, Barron decides they must surrender. And they raise a white flag. Hatteras Inlet was now captured, right? And this is the beginning of the end of Confederate commerce raiders from the Outer Banks. Now, the fourth garrison had withstood a relentless barrage of shells. It was like a hailstorm, Colonel Martin said. Another noted that the firing of shells became literally tremendous as we had falling into and immediately around the work not less than an average of 10 shells each minute. The sea being smooth, the firing was remarkably accurate. It is noted by the U.S. Navy that they fired that morning 3,000 shots into, or in the 2 days, 3,000 shot and shell into the fortification. Barron realizes he has an impossible situation, and he has no way to escape, no way to fight back the Union ships, and they knew they weren't going to be reinforced, so that caused him to surrender. Butler, when he sees the white flag go up, he gets on the tug Fanny, he goes in, demands unconditional surrender, so he takes the surrender of the forts. He then steams back to Hampton Roads, up to Washington, where he proclaims what a great victory his men had won. I got to tell you, Butler is a scamp, unscrupulous, self-promoter. You know, he's bad news for many people, and most incompetent because actually his men on the beach were left isolated, almost half of his command, and actually what won the battle of the Hatteras forts going to be Silas Horton Stringham and his heavy ships. Now there's a rush for greatness. Stringham goes back to New York to take all the prisoners to Fort Columbus on Governor's Island, New York. And so now became a huge backlash. In essence, Butler's taking the credit. People look at Stringham and say, wait a second, you may have captured that inlet, but you're not reinforcing the blockade strong enough. And really the army did the day. He has to fight against that. And so basically, Stringham will be so sickened by the political atmosphere that he resigns as commander of the Atlantic blockading squadron, which is timely because 2 weeks after his resignation, they divide the two into the North Atlantic and South Atlantic blockading squadrons. Now, what makes Hatteras so nifty? Well, I'm just going to tell you, there's Samuel Barron, there's Stringham again, the guy who really deserves the credit for this victory. He will be made a rear admiral and actually continue to serve at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, the Charleston Navy Yard during the war. Now, I got to tell you, Stringham's victory is really what makes the difference, because this is the first Union victory in the East since Big Bethel, Bull Run. The Union morale was dropping rapidly, and now they had something to truly crow about. What to crow about was, we stopped that commerce raiding, we closed that port, which by witnesses, now you see, I forgot to tell you, how come the Confederate or Federals knew all about these two forts and what they were like and what the Confederate defenses were like, is because two merchant ships captains were actually captured, and they were taken from Hatteras Inlet, New Bern, Raleigh, Hatteras Inlet, Ocracoke to Oregon Inlet, where they were allowed to escape. they immediately go up north and they proclaim how what the defenses are like, the lack of soldiers, the lack of strong forts. They actually charted the inlets, which are constantly changing, but nevertheless, they told this whole story. They gave it to the underwriters of New York, which then sent a very curt letter to Gideon Welles saying, you gotta watch out. Now you can get all this information in a blog I think I'm going to publish next week about the capture of Hatteras Inlet. Now, what else did this all mean? Well, I have to tell you that the capture of Hatteras Inlet, and the Federals do not take advantage of it. You have to realize there is a problem in defending North Carolina. The problem is all the good troops are up in Richmond, all the great cannon are up in Richmond, and no one, Jefferson Davis, no one recognizes the value of Eastern North Carolina. In fact, had Butler and Stringham stayed at Hatteras Inlet and moved in, they could have probably captured New Bern, Beaufort, anywhere they wished. The Confederates had 1,000 soldiers to stop them. And so this is pretty significant. And even though they lose Hatteras Inlet and Ocracoke Inlet very quickly, Oregon Inlet Fort is abandoned, the barracks at Portsmouth or Plymouth, Portsmouth, island is going to be abandoned. In fact, that island doesn't exist anymore. And so it was this big opportunity that was lost by the Union, because if you capture New Bern, you're 50 miles from Goldsboro. 50 miles from Goldsboro puts you right on the railroad, which leads to Richmond. You capture that and you close, actually, it would be the death knell for the Confederacy. Furthermore, the Union gunboats could have gone up the canals and actually captured Norfolk and Gosport Navy Yard while the Virginia was a building. This is a huge opportunity that was missed by the Union. And the Confederacy failed to, the Confederate government failed to recognize the importance of this region and never properly reinforced it until it was too late. So that is the battle or capture of Hatteras Inlet. Once again, I'll have a blog where I'll go through much more information. It's hard to condense a story like this into less than an hour, which I don't know if I made that. I think I did. So I want to thank you all for being part of this program today. Once again, it was a tremendous Union victory and began the slide of the Confederate control of Eastern North Carolina. So if you have any questions, please ask.
Well, John, you're so complete that everybody's just going, wow, with all the information. So I had a few questions, and some may come in while I'm talking. It's no accident that you did this talk today, which was the very date of this battle, today and tomorrow, in 1861. So huzzah for your being.
How did I think of that?
I don't know.
I've done some more of the exact dates, so I like doing that.
Yes.
I'm planning the programs for next year right now, and I'm trying to get some of those anniversary dates in. So my program on Newmarket Heights is going to be presented very close to the very date of the battle. So anyway.
Good. Well, I want you to tell me how a 2-year-old can enlist as a midshipman. Where was his mother?
His mother was at Gosport Navy Yard. His father had been commander of North Atlantic, commander of Gosport Navy Yard, and he ups and dies, right? And so he dies in 1810. Mom delivers Samuel after death of Samuel Barron Sr. and she becomes penniless because they had no retirement systems or anything like that. So if your husband dies, it's kind of too bad. So what's going to happen is to give this distinguished naval family support, they name or warrant. You don't enlist to be a midshipman, and so he gets named a midshipman in 1812. He will serve all the way until 1861, and rises to command. He doesn't become an active a midshipman until he's 9 years old. So that's nice to him. So, but anyway, that was the Navy hierarchy looking upon the Barron family, and which had recently been disgraced by James Barron during the Chesapeake Leopard affair. So to try to help them survive.
Well, thank you for that, because I just was times were going off in my head about 2-year-old.
Everyone tells me about that. So, what? That can't be true.
Right.
Well, I have to say that makes Samuel Barron one of the most senior officers in the U.S. Navy at the outbreak of the Civil War.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Having spent many, many, many hours and days on the beach at Cape Hatteras, is there any record of sharks being involved in any of that landing of 300 and some troops?
No, they were all in boats, which got to the close shore surf, which sank or broke up. But the men, they're lucky no one drowned.
Well,
no one mentions a shark. No Confederate mentions a shark from being at Hatteras and Fort Clark. So the Federals didn't bribe the great whites to come up to support their attack.
We do have a question from Tom. Did the Harriet Lane have to offload a huge cannon to avoid capsizing in the inlet?
Yes, not by capsizing. She had run aground. And so as a result of that, the first time she runs aground, they're able to back her off. The second time, she is really stuck. So they have to lighten the vessel because they're in harm's way. The Monticello is taking most of the hits and the action in the inlet itself. But yes, it was not to righten the ship, it was to lighten the ship.
Okay. David wonders what happened to the Minnesota, Susquehanna, and Pawnee after this action.
Oh, wow. They all have great careers. The Susquehanna is, it was built in 1850 as a side wheeler. It is very outmoded, but it serves through the end of the war until it will be sold for scrap. The Pawnee is a new generation of Union gunboats and stays in service even after the war is over. Now, the big thing is the Minnesota. And the Minnesota is commanded by Captain Gershon Jacques Henry Van Brunt. And he stays in command of the ship throughout the Civil War. It is the flagship of the squadron, so to speak, that is based in Hampton Roads. So the Minnesota is noted for fighting the CSS Virginia during the Battle of the Ironclads. It also was attacked by the Confederate torpedo boat, the USS or CSS Squib, commanded by Hunter Davison on April 9th, 1864. And so, yeah, it's all these ships are part of the core of the Navy at the outbreak of the Civil War, because they had less than 50 steamers in the U.S. Navy. How can you blockade 3,600 miles of coastline with just 50 steamers? Because you got to have steamers. These sailing ships that are still in operation are pretty good for trying to close inlets. But if you want to put it on a chase against a swift blockade runner, if the wind's not in the right direction, they ain't going to do it. So I would say all these ships serve well for the U.S. Navy.
Well, Stephanie asked, how long and where was the Monticello repaired?
It was repaired. It went up to the Philadelphia Navy Yard and was repaired there. Because remember, there's no naval repair facilities owned by the Navy until you go up to the Philadelphia Navy Yard, which the Monticello past Baltimore, which could have fixed it there, but Baltimore is barely under the control of the Union at that time. And so what they did is they went up into the Capes, up to the Chesapeake Delaware Canal, and then up the Delaware River to the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and was repaired. The repairs were not significant, right? I mean, or the damage was not that significant. But all these ships needed constant maintenance because of their boilers that would actually wear out, and also their engine systems that needed care. That's why the South Atlantic Blockading Squadron created all those workshops at Port Royal Sound, South Carolina. That's why as soon as the Federals get Gosport Navy Yard back, they are with glee because they now can fix their ships there that are from the North Atlantic Blockading Squadron.
Well, you have written blogs on both those subjects, John, so we encourage you to check out our blogs on Port Royal Sound and the Gosport Navy Yard. Tom has an interesting comment here. He says, I recall a story of Union ships firing cannon shells at a herd of cattle that were stampeding due to the noise.
Yes.
Ships thought they were cavalry.
That
was going to tell us.
Yeah, that was in my blog.
Okay.
Or will be in the blog, so I apologize. But when they come in to try and support Max Weber's troops isolated 2 miles from Fort Clark on the dunes, heavy winds. So they come in and they see this rush through the scrubs and they start firing at it. And actually, it was a group of Hatteras wild ponies who had been spooked by what was happening at Fort Clark, and then they got up and started moving. And of course, if you're Max Weber on the shore, they are so isolated, their ammunition is wet, they got a problem. And so if you are on, let's say the Monticello, and see this going on, you can't see well enough. You think that is Confederate cavalry, actually just the wild ponies of Hatteras.
Oh dear. Well, they weren't cattle then, Tom. They were poor little ponies, but.
Yes, and no one knows their casualties. So I just want to let you know, I think they may have gotten away with it. So, but yeah, so anyway.
Well, Stephanie is asking about the Hawkins Wobbs, their impact in the area after this capture.
Oh my gosh, it is really great. And in fact, it's included in my blog about Roanoke Island. I did a series on Burnside's expedition that took you from Roanoke Island all the way to Beaufort. And I think there are 3 or 4 blogs, probably about 15,000 words. So I think it's kind of what you need to know. Well, anyway, Hawkins troops stay behind and occupy Hatteras Inlet. They maintain their control of that. There are actually troops also at Ocracoke. So right after the capture of Roanoke Island and the 9th New York took this heroic charge against the Confederate fortifications, lo and behold, another New Jersey regiment that was capturing it off a causeway. But the Hawkins press agents, so it sounded like they made this heroic attack. In fact, I have a Currier and Ives print that shows the Zouaves making that attack. And actually, being crazy as a younger person, I have maybe 100 toy soldiers of the Hawkins Zouaves. So there you have it. Now they will also burn Winton, North Carolina. They go up, and that's I think that's another half-hour story. But so they were main operators in the Sounds of North Carolina from their arrival, end of August, all the way through the capture of Fort Macon in April of 1862.
John, I've got to tell you, you're from the Eastern Shore, so you say okra croak, but here in North Carolina, we say okra coke. So it's just a little different in pronunciation for those linguists among us.
So we got lots of cokes.
Yeah, cokes and croaks, right?
We call them croaks because we got several of those. It's an Indian Native American name.
Right.
And so you have.
But yeah, so we say it.
I think of a couple. Anyway, so yeah, I'm from the Eastern Shore, and that's why I talk so funny.
That's okay. I'm from North Carolina. So our friend Fernando from Venezuela asked, how important is the capture of Hatteras Inlet for the rest of the war?
Gotta tell you, it is so critical. It's critical because it's a Union victory amidst all these other defeats. It is critical because it stops this commerce raid. It is critical because the Federals retain control, and they then are going to be able to launch Burnside's expedition to capture Roanoke Island. Capture Roanoke Island led Burnside to capture New Bern, Plymouth, Little Washington, Winton, Newport, Carolina City, Beaufort, Fort Macon. Now, the trouble is, there is Burnside in late April of 1862. And he recognizes he has this great ability to strike and capture Goldsboro. He mentions that. And he also says, he actually sent troops up the Great Dismal Swamp Canal, which resulted in the April 19th, 1862 Battle of South Mills, where Jesse Reno says, my men are too tired. The 9th New York, Hawkins Zouaves are there. I guess that's Stephanie. And so they retreated. They're within 40 miles of Norfolk with no defenses in their way. Yeah, it is totally unbelievable that the Federals don't take, because had they captured Norfolk, Virginia was gone. James River open, no defenses up the James River. It would have happened like that. The Virginia would have been scuttled, and voila, the U.S. Navy could have been in Richmond, and the end would have ended. Especially with marching on Goldsboro by Burnside, which he wrote. McClellan says, "We need your corps," which was a division, but it's called a corps then, and we need your troops to come back up to Virginia because I don't have enough troops to operate, right? So Burnside writes back and says, I need to capture Goldsboro because then Richmond will fall because they can't get any supplies. And McClellan says, no, you need to come here. Burnside never makes it in time to help McClellan's Peninsular Campaign, but he does make it in time to fight at Second Manassas and at Antietam.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we've got one more question.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was typing something to Terrence. Sorry. Did I interrupt your sentence? So sorry. No. Tom asked, has the Fresnel lens of the Hatteras Light been removed by the Confederates before the battle occurred?
Yes.
I believe they were removed to hinder the Union ships.
Yes, the light was, all those lights along the coast were only going to benefit Union shipping. So they were actually, all taken apart. In other words, the lights couldn't work. So when the Federals came in, they relit, so to speak, the lights. The Confederates realized the value of these lights along the coast of Virginia and North Carolina. And actually, Henry Yates Beale, who was a part of the Confederate Volunteer Coast Guard, they were raiders using log canoes to get around. They actually destroyed the Cape Charles light. And so the light, from the lens that we have here in the museum, is the replacement. And so, yeah, it's lighthouses are more important than you can imagine for commerce, especially in one of the most deadly reaches you can make is going around Cape Hatteras, Cape Lookout, this is near where you were born, and a place called Cape Fear, rightly so. So dangerous close, the lighthouses are critical, and so to stop any aid of navigation, the Confederates destroyed them, and then the Federals rebuilt those that they had.
Yes, and if you haven't been to the museum, you should come to see our Fresnel lens in our main lobby. It is absolutely stunning, and we're thrilled to have it. John, advance your slides to where people can contact you.
Oh gosh, I'm such an airhead. So
I know.
if you have any other questions, of course, you can email me. There's my email address. I know some of you all, I recognize some of your names. Do so, and the blog will be published, I think, sometime next week. I hadn't written a conclusion to my story because I love figuring that out as I'm actually telling the story. So I now know how to finish my blog. And so, yeah, that's pretty neat. And so also we have a YouTube channel where this will appear sometime very, very soon. My blogs are on Mariners Museum website. And lo and behold, you can buy some of my books signed at the Mariners Museum gift shop. Anyway, sorry.
John, quickly tell them September 10 is our next lecture.
Yes, and this is an unusual one because I recognize that ever since the Ironclad Board in September of 1861, there were all these designs turned in. And I have to tell you, none of them, the new Ironsides was a great design, but it didn't have the draft. But we had some crazy designs. We even turned in one that was rubber, so the shot would bounce off. However, they forgot about the impact of shells, so that didn't work. We had another one, the Galena. We have another one, the Keokuk, which is a sad story in design, in everything. Then we have the Dundenberg that only was finished at the end of the war, and we offloaded that as quickly as we could to France, and because France was in a naval race with Great Britain. It's amazing where you see some of our post-war ironclads end up. Some of them are broken up on the stocks. Some of them are sold to like Peru during the Guano Wars. I know Fernando will like that. It's actually called the War of the Pacific. I call it the Guano Wars because it's about these islands. And so in essence, that's a huge bit of history because there was never a showdown between a Union-built monitor, the Peruvian Navy, against a casemated British ironclad in the Chilean Navy. So I don't know. It's a great story.
Many
And
more to come. That absolutely. Well,
yeah.
John, thank you for this trip to one of my favorite places in the world, Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, and for this informative look back. How many 100 years ago? I can't do that math in my head.
That would
A while.
be
But thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you hopefully on September 10th. And if not before, we'll see you in the galleries. Thanks for attending, and thank you, John.
thank
Bye-bye.
you, Julie, and thank you all.
Bye-bye.